The pie was still warm on the counter when my granddaughter slid her hand into mine under the table and squeezed so hard it hurt. She was 7 years old and she did not look at me. She looked at her plate and she whispered, "Pop, Pop, your medicine is wrong." Daddy switched the bottles. I watched him do it in the bathroom. That was Thanksgiving evening, a little after 6, and by 9 o'clock that same night, I was sitting in the back of a sheriff's cruiser in my own driveway, wrapped in a blanket, watching them lead my son-in-law out of my house in handcuffs while my daughter screamed that I had ruined everything. Before I tell you what my granddaughter saw in that bathroom, do me a favor and drop a comment telling me what state you're watching from. I'm 71 years old, and I never thought I'd be telling this story to anybody, so it helps me to know somebody out there is listening. Let me back up, because none of it makes sense unless you understand the kind of man I'd been my whole life. I spent 34 years driving a route for the post office out of Macon, Georgia. Rain, ice, dogs, all of it. I married my Ruth in 1974, and we raised one daughter in a little brick ranch on Pinehurst Road. And when Ruth passed 2 springs ago from a stroke that took her in her sleep, that house got real quiet. I kept it the way she liked it. Her reading glasses are still on the windowsill. I couldn't tell you why I haven't moved them. So when my daughter called in early November and said the whole family wanted to do Thanksgiving at my place this year, I about cried right there on the phone. I said yes before she finished asking. I should have heard something in her voice, that careful, pleasant tone people use when they've already decided something and they're just managing you into it. But I didn't. I heard my little girl wanting to come home, and that's all I wanted to hear. My daughter is named after her grandmother. She married a man who sold cars, then sold timeshares, then sold something he called investment opportunities that I never did understand. He always had a firm handshake and a watch too nice for a man who complained about money the way he did. They have one boy and one girl, and that little girl, my granddaughter, is the spitting image of Ruth. Same serious eyes. Same way of going quiet and watching a room when grown-ups think kids aren't paying attention. They got to the house around 2 on Thanksgiving Day. My son-in-law came in first, stamping his shoes even though there wasn't a speck of snow, just Georgia rain. He grabbed my hand and pumped it and said, "Big day, huh?" And I noticed the watch right off, because it was new gold, the kind of thing I'd have had to save a year for. Last time we talked, he'd told me the car lot let him go and money was tight, and could I maybe help with the mortgage 1 month. I'd sent him $800 I didn't really have. And here was that watch. My daughter came in behind him carrying a casserole she hadn't made. You could tell by the store sticker she forgot to peel off the bottom, and she hugged me a beat too long and a beat too tight. My grandson, who's 11 now and only cares about his phone, grunted at me and barked himself on the couch. And my granddaughter came in last, holding a stuffed rabbit. She's too old for, but carries anyway. And she ran straight to me and wrapped her arms around my leg and didn't let go. I cooked the turkey myself, Ruth's recipe, the one with the orange and the rosemary butter under the skin. I'd been up since 5. I had her cornbread dressing going and the green beans she always made with the bacon, and I'd bought a pumpkin pie from the bakery on Vineville because I never could get a crust right. The kitchen smelled like every Thanksgiving I'd had for 40 years, and it was the first time since the funeral the house felt full. We sat down around 4. I said grace, the short one Ruth liked, and I watched my son-in-law's foot bounce under the table the whole time. His phone kept lighting up. He'd flip it over, jaw tight, then flip it back and check it again. My daughter talked a blue streak, the kids' school, some kitchen remodel, a trip to Destin they were planning. I kept nodding, but I was watching the boy across from me bounce his leg and ignore his food, and I was watching my granddaughter, who hadn't touched her plate either. She just kept looking from her father to me and back again, like she was trying to do a math problem in her head. About halfway through, my son-in-law's phone buzzed 3 times fast, and he stood up so quick his chair scraped. "I gotta take this," he said. "Business thing." And he headed down the hall toward the back of the house, toward the bathroom and the bedrooms, not out to the porch where you'd take a call. A minute later, my granddaughter set down her fork and said she had to go potty, and before her mother could tell her to use the hall, she was already gone, padding off down that same hallway in her socks. She wasn't gone 2 minutes. When she came back, her face had gone the color of the tablecloth, and she climbed up next to me instead of going to her own chair. And that's when she took my hand under the table and squeezed and told me about the medicine. Now I take a lot of pills. That's just being 71. I take a blood thinner, warfarin, on account of a clot I had 3 years back. And I take a heart pill and a water pill and a couple others. And they're all lined up in a little plastic organizer with the days of the week on the bathroom counter, the big one in the hall bath. Because my eyes aren't what they were, and I need the daylight from that window to read the labels. My granddaughter knows all this. She's the kind of kid who notices everything. She'd seen her daddy in there, she said, with my warfarin bottle and another bottle, pouring pills back and forth. And when she pushed the door, he jumped and told her, "Get out, go on, this is grown-up stuff." I want to tell you, I knew right then. I didn't. My first thought was that she'd seen wrong, that he was just looking for an aspirin and got confused, because the alternative was a thing my mind could not hold. So I did what I'd done my whole life with that man. I gave him the benefit of the doubt. I patted her hand and told her not to worry. Pop would check on it, and I tried to go back to passing the dressing like the floor hadn't just opened up under me, but I couldn't let it sit. After a few minutes, I said I needed to use the restroom, and I went down that same hall, and I shut the door of the hall bath behind me, and I picked up my pill organizer. And I knew my own pills. I'd been taking them long enough to know the warfarin was a little pink tablet scored down the middle, and the Saturday slot and the Sunday slot and 3 days after that were full of little white ones I had never seen in my life. Somebody had picked out every one of my blood thinners for the back half of the week and put something else in their place. I stood there holding that plastic box, and my hands started to shake. I'd worked 34 years around enough people to know things. I knew you don't just stop a blood thinner cold, and I had a creeping memory of a thing the pharmacist had told me once, that the dangerous part isn't even stopping it. It's other pills that interfere, that can make you bleed inside or clot when you shouldn't. I didn't know exactly what those white pills were, but I knew my son-in-law had been alone in that bathroom with them and my medicine. And I knew my granddaughter wasn't a liar, and I knew that man had been asking me questions, all full I'd been too polite to think hard about. He'd asked back in September, real casual, whether I'd ever updated my will after Ruth died. I said I hadn't gotten around to it. He'd said I really ought to, for the kid's sake, and offered to set me up with a lawyer he knew. In October, he'd asked if I'd thought about who'd handle my affairs if something happened. Did I have a power of attorney? And wouldn't it make sense for him to be on my bank accounts, just in case, so bills got paid if I had another health scare? I'd told him I'd think about it. He brought it up twice more. And there was the life insurance. Ruth and I had taken out policies on each other decades ago, and when she died, hers paid out, and I'd never touched it. Just let it sit in the bank, near about $300,000. My daughter knew that. I told her at the funeral, thinking it would ease her mind that her old man was taken care of. The beneficiary on my own policy, the one I'd never changed, was my daughter. $250,000 on top of everything else if I died. I put the organizer back exactly where it had been. I don't know why. Some animal instinct told me not to let him see I knew. I splashed water on my face and looked at myself in Ruth's mirror, an old man, gone gray and stunned, and I went back out to that table and I sat down and I smiled and I said, "Sorry plumbing at my age." And everybody laughed, and my son-in-law laughed loudest of all. And I have never in my life wanted so badly to put my hands around a man's throat. The doorbell rang around then. It was the Caldwells from next door, brought over a sweet potato pie like they do every year, and behind them came old Mr. Drew Abernathy from across the street, who's 86 and eats Thanksgiving alone since his wife went into the home. I'd invited them for dessert weeks ago, and I want to tell you, standing in my doorway, shaking hands and taking pies while my son-in-law clapped backs and played the gracious host in my house, in my home, I thought I might come apart at the seams. For the next couple hours I played along. I poured coffee and cut pie and laughed at Mr. Abernathy's same stories he tells every year. But my mind was running like a man's mind runs when he knows he's in trouble. I thought, just confront him, stand up and say I know what you did and get out of my house. But the man was desperate, and I'd seen what the watch and the lie about the job meant. And I had a house full of people and 2 children in the next room, one of them his own, and I did not know what a cornered man would do. I thought about just leaving, getting in my truck and driving to the sheriff, but it was my house and they'd still be in it, and I kept landing on the same hard fact, which is that I had no proof yet that would mean anything. A box of pills with white tablets in it. A child's word. He'd say I mixed them up myself. He'd say his daughter was confused. He'd say her grandfather was getting senile, and wasn't that convenient, given everything he'd been hinting at. So I made a decision standing in my own kitchen scraping plates. I was going to keep my mouth shut, keep him calm, and I was going to get the proof and get those children out of harm's way, and then I was going to bring the whole world down on that man. First thing I did, when nobody was looking, I went back to that bathroom and I got the swap pills out. I had an empty prescription bottle in the medicine cabinet, an old one, and I tipped every one of those white tablets into it and screwed the cap on and put it down in my sock against my ankle. Then I refilled the empty slots with my real warfarin out of the bottle in the cabinet, so the organizer looked normal again. So if he checked, nothing seemed wrong. My hands were steadier doing it than I expected. The 34 years of doing a job right, when the hands are cold, teaches you something. Then I took out my phone and I'm no good with a thing, but I know how to take a picture. I photographed the organizer with the white pills before I touched it, except I'd already touched it. So I had to be honest with myself that I'd messed that part up. But I photographed the white tablets close, and the bottle they came out of, when I poured them in. And I texted my own self the pictures, so they'd have the timestamp on them, 6:41 in the evening. My route taught me to document. You learn that when a package goes missing and a man wants to blame you. Around 7, the neighbors started gathering their dishes to head home, and that's when I saw something that turned my stomach to ice water. My son-in-law had drifted into the kitchen and my daughter followed him, and I was just outside the doorway in the dark of the hall, and they didn't see me. He was leaning close to her, talking low, and she was shaking her head. And he gripped her arm above the elbow and said something I'll hear till the day I die. He said, "It has to be tonight. He won't take the Saturday dose till morning anyway. We're back in Macon by then. By the time anybody finds him, it looks like his heart, like his blood, like an old man who forgot his pills. Nobody questions a 71-year-old. And my daughter, my little girl, the child I taught to ride a bike on Pinehurst Road, she put her face in her hands, and then she nodded. I have replayed that nod 10,000 times. I keep waiting for the version where she pulls away from him and runs to me. She never does. She nodded. I stepped back into the dark before they saw me, and I went and found my granddaughter where she was lying on the floor in front of the TV, not watching it, just holding that rabbit. I knelt down by her, and my knees aren't good, but I got down there, and I put my mouth close to her ear, and I said, "Baby, you did so good telling me. I need you to do one more thing for Pop Pop. When I give you the nod, I want you to take your brother and go in my bedroom and lock the door, and don't open it for anybody but me or a police officer. Can you do that?" She looked at me with Ruth's eyes and she said, "Are we in trouble?" And I said, "No, sugar. You're the bravest girl I ever met, and everything's going to be okay. I didn't know if that was true, but I needed it to be. The neighbors left around 7:15. Mr. Abernathy at the door took my hand in both of his papery ones and said, "Walt, you tell Ruth's recipe still beats them all." And I said I would. And I watched him shuffle across the street under the porch light, and I thought, that might be the last person who ever sees me alive. Then I shut the door and turned around to my family. My son-in-law was already at it. "Long day, huh?" he said. "You look beat. You ought to take your medicine and turn in early. We'll clean up." So smooth, so caring. My daughter wouldn't meet my eyes. She was scrubbing a pan that was already clean. I said, "Think I will here in a bit." And I went down the hall to the bedroom, and I caught my granddaughter's eye, and I gave her the nod, and that little girl took her brother by the sleeve and told him she needed help with something, and got him up off that couch and down the hall. And I heard my own bedroom door click shut and the lock turn. 11 years old and 7 years old behind a locked door. My grandchildren. Then I went into the hall bathroom, the one with the lock, and I shut it, and I locked it, and I sat down on the closed lid of the toilet, and I took out my phone, and I dialed 911. The lady who answered had the calmest voice I ever heard. I kept mine down to almost nothing. I said, "My name is Walter." And I gave her my full name, the one I won't put on here, and I gave her my address on Pinehurst Road, and I said, "My son-in-law has tampered with my heart medication tonight to try to kill me, and I have the pills, and I have pictures, and my daughter knows about it. And my 2 grandchildren are in the house locked in a bedroom, and I need help right now, and I need it quiet." She asked was I in immediate danger. I said I was locked in the bathroom, and they thought I was going to bed and take the poison dose in the morning, and that I'd heard the man say it had to be tonight. She told me units were on the way. 8 minutes out, stay on the line. Do not confront anyone. Do not open the door. I said, "Yes, ma'am." And then the knocking started. "Pop, you in there?" Real friendly. "You okay? You've been in there a while." I put my hand over the phone. I said, "I'm all right, just my stomach." A pause, then the knob turned. Just a little. Testing. It was locked, and it held. "Pop, open the door, let me help you to bed." Closer now. There was something underneath the friendly that wasn't friendly at all. The dispatcher said in my ear low and steady, "Do not open that door. Officers are 6 minutes out." He hit it then. Not a knock, a shoulder. The frame jumped. My daughter's voice somewhere behind him, high and scared. What are you doing? Stop." And his voice cutting her off. "He's on the phone. Can't you hear him? He's on the phone with somebody." And then both fists on the door, and the whole wall shaking. And him shouting my name, not friendly anymore, shouting to open the door, and me sitting on the toilet lid, with my back against the vanity and my feet braced on the door. An old mailman holding off a younger man with the soles of my shoes and the cheap interior lock from 1986. 4 minutes, the dispatcher said. "Stay with me, Walter. You're doing fine. The kids." I could hear them now too, my granddaughter crying behind the bedroom door down the hall, and that gave me a strength I didn't know I had left. I hollered through the bathroom door, "The police are on their way right now, and they have heard every word. You touch those children, and you will not see daylight again." That stopped him a second. I heard him say to my daughter, "Get the kids, we're leaving, get them in the car," and her saying the door was locked, they'd locked themselves in, and him cussing, and a crash that was him hitting the bedroom door instead of mine. I came up off that toilet then. I unlocked the bathroom, and I came out into the hall with my phone in my hand, and I put myself between that man and my grandchildren's door, and I want to tell you, I was not afraid anymore. I was something past afraid. I said, "You will go through me." And he looked at me, and I saw it. The same thing I'd refused to see for years, that there was nothing behind his eyes for me at all, that I had never once been a person to him, just an old man sitting on top of money he wanted. Then the lights hit the front windows, red and blue spinning across Ruth's good curtains, and you could hear the cars in the drive, and the doors slamming and the boots on the porch, and somebody pounding the front door so hard the wreath fell off. Sheriff's office. Opened the door, and my son-in-law's whole body changed. The fight drained right out of him and left something small and gray standing there. My daughter started to cry, and I walked past both of them to the front door and I opened it for the law. I won't drag out the rest. They came in fast and got us all separated. A young deputy took the bottle of white pills out of my sock with gloves on his hands and looked at me like I'd handed him a snake. They got my grandchildren out of the bedroom, and a female deputy sat with them in the kitchen and gave them juice and didn't let them see what came next. They walked my son-in-law out in handcuffs and he didn't look at me, just kept his head down. And they walked my daughter out too, and she did look at me, over her shoulder, and she said, "How could you do this to me?" And I had to hold on to the door frame so I didn't fall down, because 43 years, and that was the question she chose to ask. The white pills turned out to be a blood pressure medication, a strong one, that a man my age on my heart drugs is never supposed to take, in a dose that the medical examiner later testified would likely have dropped my pressure to nothing in my sleep and stopped my heart by morning, with the missing blood thinner making the whole thing red like natural causes to any doctor who didn't go looking. He'd gotten them, the detective told me, from his own mother's medicine cabinet, planned it down to the pill. The trial took most of 2 weeks and I sat through every minute of it. They put up his debts near $400,000, gambling out at the river boats and worse, money owed to men who don't send letters. They put up the text between him and my daughter, and the search history on his phone for how the medications interacted, and they put up my pictures with the timestamp, 6:41 in the evening, and they played the 911 call, and the whole courtroom went still when you could hear the door booming behind my voice. They put my granddaughter on a video screen so she didn't have to be in the room with her parents, and she told the truth, simple and clear, the way only a child can, about the bottles in the bathroom. I have never been so proud and so heartbroken in the same minute of my life. The jury was out 4 hours. They found my son-in-law guilty of attempted murder, and the judge gave him 30 years. My daughter took a plea. She'd known and she'd helped, and she'd nodded, and she got 12. The day they sentenced him, he turned around in his chair and found my face in the gallery and mouthed 2 words at me, and they weren't sorry. They were your fault. And maybe somewhere I'll always wonder if he was right, if I made him soft or made him hungry or just plain didn't see what I raised that daughter into. A man could spend the rest of his days in that wondering. I have my grandchildren now. The court gave them to me, both of them, and we live in the brick ranch on Pinehurst Road where their grandmother's reading glasses are still on the windowsill. My grandson is coming around slow. He doesn't talk about it. My granddaughter sleeps with the hall light on and still won't go in that bathroom, and I don't make her. We had a fellow come and put a whole new lock on the front door and a real one on the bedroom too, and I keep my pills now in a safe by my bed, and I count them out myself every single night. And every single night I think about how a 7-year-old who notices everything is the only reason I'm here to count them. This past Sunday we drove out and visited Ruth. I cut back the weeds and I told her our family broke in a way I never saw coming. And I told her our grandbabies are safe and under my roof. And I told her I'm sorry I didn't see it sooner, that I was too proud of being a man who gives people the benefit of the doubt. My granddaughter planted a little dogwood by the headstone, scratched the dirt in around it with her bare hands, and asked me, would it bloom? I told her come spring it would. She asked me, was I sad? I told her every single day, but I told her I'd rather be sad and standing here with her than the other thing, and she seemed to understand that better than a child should have to. So let me leave you with what an old mailman learned the hard way at 71, because if it does one of you any good, then maybe some of this was worth it. Loving somebody is not the same as trusting them blind. I spent years calling it love when really I just didn't want to see, sending money I didn't have, ignoring questions about my will and my accounts because looking straight at them meant admitting what my own child had become. The signs were all there. A new watch on a man who cried, poor. Questions about insurance from people who never asked how you were sleeping. Sudden interest in your money from folks who had no time for your company. Watch for that. And listen to your grandchildren. They see everything, and they don't yet know how to pretend they didn't. My granddaughter saw the truth in a bathroom mirror's worth of a second and had the courage to take my hand and tell me, and I almost talked myself out of believing her because the believing was too hard. Don't you do that. If a child you love tugs your sleeve and tells you something's wrong, you get down on your bad knees and you listen. It may be the only warning you ever get. It was mine. The hardest part wasn't the bathroom door buckling under his shoulder. It was the nod. I'd given my daughter everything I had, and when the moment came, she put her face in her hands and she nodded. I've spent a lot of quiet mornings on the porch since then, trying to understand how a child I taught to ride a bike on Pinehurst Road ended up at that table. And the truth I keep coming back to is this. Nothing that happened that Thanksgiving came out of nowhere. Every piece of it was set in motion long before, by small choices nobody stopped to question. My son-in-law didn't wake up a killer. He woke up a man who'd been telling himself little lies for years, that he deserved more than he earned, that someone else's money was almost his, that a debt could be solved by a shortcut instead of work. One lie made room for the next, until a man who once shook my hand at his wedding was pouring pills into my organizer. That's how it works. Character isn't one big decision. It's 1,000 small ones, and they add up while you're not looking. I think about the 3 things that actually saved my life, because they're the same 3 things I want my grandchildren to carry. The first is doing right even when it costs you. I almost talked myself out of believing the 7-year-old because believing her meant admitting what my own daughter had become. Choosing the hard truth over the comfortable lie is the whole ball game. The second is paying attention. The signs were all there. The watch, the questions about my will, the sudden interest in a man they'd never had time for. I saw them and I looked away. Seeing clearly is its own kind of strength, and refusing to see is how good people get hurt. The third is the plain stubborn nerve to act. Knowing the truth meant nothing until I bagged those pills, took the pictures, locked that door, and dialed. Courage without a clear head is reckless, and a clear head without the guts to move is useless. You need both, walking together. My granddaughter had all 3 in a single second, standing in a doorway. She saw something wrong. She had the decency to believe her own eyes, and she took my hand and told me when staying quiet would have been easier. 7 years old. So if you take one thing from an old mailman, take this. Build those 3 muscles in yourself and in the kids who look up to you. The willingness to do right, the habit of looking straight at what's in front of you, and the backbone to act on it. They won't make your life comfortable. They didn't make mine, but they were the only reason I lived to plant a dogwood beside my Ruth and drive my grandbabies home.